Ho 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 ho! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Let's Dev Holiday Special. In this episode, we make things personal by replacing the bland blocks and shapes with true and defined art assets. Unfortunately, I learned that some of the programs I use don't work well with my recording software, so instead of wasting time setting something complicated up to record pixel art of all things, I opted to just not record it at all. Sorry folks. However, art was created and it was time to implement it. Starting with the player, an adorable yet extremely frightened teddy bear only had a set of 5 sprite indexes, one for each state. The states being idle, walking, running, caught, and boxed. Idle, walking, and running were pretty standard in definition. If player is walking, use the walk sprite, if running, the run sprite, and idle being their default sprite. Left and right movement dictated its direction, but that's as far as direction-focused sprites went. Until we got to the caught state. The caught state was trickier as Santa has 3 different states depending on his direction, so before we could get to that, we had to add Santa sprites. Santa is made up of 3 different sprite indexes, all based on his direction. If moving down, he faces down, if moving up, he faces up, and moving to the left or right uses a side sprite. Because this was defined way back when he was first created, the implementation was as easy as locking sprites to directions. Now with this done, we could go back to the player sprites and follow suit, basing the player sprites and positioning on Santa's. A unique addition to Santa, however, were his arms. To give Santa definition, his arms were added separately, and because he carries the player by the foot with his right arm, definition was important for continuity. This required an extended array based on not only Santa's direction, but whether or not he was currently holding onto the player. And finally, we had the player in the box sprite. This sprite's animation would work a little differently than everything else for a couple of reasons. The first being it would only proceed as the player struggled, and would also work as an indicator as to how close they were to escaping the box. The more the player struggled to get out, the further in the animation the sprite would advance, until the player was out of the box. Again, this took a little longer to get working right because I'm bad at math. Now that our 2 stars have been prettied up, it was time to work on the HUD. Simple white hearts depict the amount of remaining lives players have. Santa's face at the lower right provides constant updates to his current state, and next to Santa's face is a bar that keeps track of Santa's stamina. Once again, a large amount of time was spent on getting this bar to work right because I'm bad at math. For those of you good at basic math may notice a pattern is emerging. Eventually, Santa's stamina bar was figured out, and it was time to add the little helper icon, which would help keep track of whether or not it was alive, active, and if it was currently assisting Santa. And now with the HUD basically finished, the art for the boxes and traps were added. The traps themselves are indeed symbol monkeys that clap when triggered. Finally, art surrounding the border of the level was added, and the lighting mechanic was refined. Now it was time to add a few more bells and whistles, the first being the key prompts to help the players out during moments where they should be hitting keys, A and D during the caught state, and spacebar during the box state, and a bit of sweat/tear animation during the really stressful moments. Oh, and also a blatant exclamation point when Santa is right on the player's tail, you know, to make it abundantly obvious that they should be scared. Looking at the HUD, I wasn't a fan of the hearts simply disappearing when they were lost, so I spent a ton of unnecessary time adding grayed out hearts with crosses through them. And the crosses were random, because I apparently like wasting time on details most probably will never notice. I'd forgotten at this point that Santa's little helper still hadn't had its art added, so it was time to right that wrong. Implementation was pretty standard. If active, the pole would jut from the snow, and when destroyed, it would reset itself to a death state until needed again. I then added an emitter to the helper for 2 reasons. To make it easier to find, and to make it blatantly obvious that the helper was doing something other than just being pretty. Now with everything looking so pretty, it was time to add the snow floor and some foliage to give it that extra personality. A tile set consisting of various snow tiles was used and placed at random the entire width and height of the level. Foliage was then added during the level generation stage. At this point, all that was left was to tidy up the assets so everything flowed well visually before moving on to the final remaining steps. And all that remained were the intro and end bits to our little game. Starting with the intro, the main information we pass through here is the current difficulty, referred to as the night, and a helpful tip. The intro is important to not only mask the generation happening behind the scenes, but also ready the player for the game. As for the end, I wanted something a little more flashy, so after the corresponding end animation plays, the results display the number of nights survived, the longest survival streak, and options to continue, try again, or quit. Pretty standard stuff for a video game. And that's it, folks. Packed by Christmas, from nothing to, well, something. There was a ton of other features I wanted to add, such as different characters with stat differences, character colors, elevated scenarios, and so on, but this project clocked in at just under 24 hours. It's a project I may revisit in the future in some capacity, but for now, it'll remain arguably my first game created under such a tight restriction, and I hope you all enjoyed watching the development of this game as much as I did creating it. If you'd like to play the game, a link to download it can be found in the description below, and just as a note, the difficulty is infinite, and my best score during testing was like 3 nights. But once again, I want to thank everyone who has shown not only Let's Dev, but my entire channel's worth of content their support. And I hope you've also enjoyed this series as well. Have a wonderful holiday season and new year, and as always, I'll see you guys next time. Taking a break from the traps, I started to work on the win-loss conditions for the game. For players to win and survive, all they have to do is wait out Santa's stamina. Once Santa tires himself out, that's it. However, should they get caught and boxed 3 times, well,